Conjuring Last Rites marks the end of the main Conjuring line, following Ed and Lorraine Warren as they take on their final case. This time they're called in to help a family tormented by a malevolent spirit seemingly intent on killing them. At the center of the haunting is a mysterious full-length mirror, one that Lorraine first encountered during their earliest investigation. Meanwhile, their daughter Judy begins to face supernatural visions of her own, struggling to distinguish between the living and the dead. This setup promises a deeply personal send-off for the Warrens, one that ties their family's past and their present into their final terrifying case. So the Conjuring universe has always been a little bit of a mixed bag for me. Despite featuring some really big horror names and impressive talent, the quality from film to film swings wildly. I either find them deeply forgettable or surprisingly great. There's rarely any in-between. When the franchise sticks to its core stories of Ed and Lorraine though, I usually find myself a little bit more invested. The Conjuring 2 remains my favorite by far. It struck a perfect balance between heartfelt emotion and genuine terror. The first Conjuring film was a little bit too reliant on horror stereotypes, and the third one, The Devil Made Me Do It, didn't really do much for me at all. So going into Last Rites, I didn't really know what to expect, but I was hopeful that it might return to what made that second movie so strong. To its credit, Last Rites does try to bring things full circle. It returns to the core elements that made that original movie as effective as it was. A haunted house, a tormented family, and a single sinister object linking the living to the dead. The movie draws inspiration from the real-life Smurl haunting, though it does take some creative liberties. The true events spanned over a decade, while the film condenses everything into just a few months. The haunted mirror, which does exist in real life in the Warrens Museum, wasn't actually part of the Smurl case, but it was added here to amplify the supernatural connection. Personally, I usually try to overlook historical inaccuracy in these films since the storytelling often benefits from being fictionalized. Judged on its own terms, Last Rites tells a decent, if somewhat conventional haunted house story. A pretty large portion of this movie focuses on Judy Warren, their daughter, who is struggling with visions that mirror her mother's own gift. She develops a chant to suppress these visions, symbolizing how people sometimes bottle up their fears and emotions instead of confronting them. The subplot revolving around Judy is emotionally charged, especially when you learn that she was stillborn, and then she was resuscitated about a minute later, which, by the way, completely fictional addition. It didn't actually happen in real life, and that was to deepen the family's emotional stakes in the story. While I appreciated what the writers were aiming at, I found this storyline to be a little bit distracting. The heart of the movie should have been the Smurl haunting, but Judy's personal struggles often took away from that. It felt like the film was torn between being a family drama and a supernatural thriller, and it never really fully committed to either. The actual Smurl story is fascinating, arguably way more so than what's presented in this movie. There's enough material in that real case to fuel an incredible horror film, but Last Rites feels strangely restrained, as if it was holding back on purpose. The film's main spirit, a ghostly farmer kind of guy, is underwhelming compared to some other entities that we've seen throughout the Conjuring universe. There's maybe one effective shot where he's just barely visible in a shadowy corner in the basement, but beyond that, he doesn't make that much of an impression. It almost feels as if the filmmakers knew that the supernatural element was kind of lacking, because there's a surprising amount of Annabelle woven into the movie that you probably wouldn't expect. There's one bizarre scene where Annabelle grows to the size of an entire house, which was weird. You know, it was visually striking, but it was very confusing. Still, I would give it credit where it's due. The film does deliver a few legitimately eerie moments, and the jump scares, while expected, are executed well enough to make you flinch. Where Last Rites really shines is in its production design. The story takes place in the 80s, and the sets, costumes, and hairstyles all perfectly capture that period. The use of VHS home videotapes throughout the film adds a layer of authenticity and nostalgia. It honestly reminded me of my own family's old camcorder footage. Cinematography also stands out, especially when it comes down to the recurring mirror imagery. Reflections are used symbolically throughout the film, exploring this idea that what stares back at us might not be entirely innocent. It's a familiar theme in horror, but one that's used effectively here, and it ties neatly into the movie's central haunting. At the end of the day, I would say that The Conjuring: Last Rites is a solid but sometimes forgettable entry into the franchise. It's technically well made, and occasionally it is creepy, but it doesn't really reach the heights of what I want from the series, especially from what you got from The Conjuring 2. That said, I would still consider it to be one of the better movies in the main storylines. I'd even say it's the second best. My ranking would be The Conjuring 2, which is way better than any of the others by far, and then it would go to The Last Rites. The third would be the first original Conjuring film, and then of course, The Devil Made Me Do It sucked, so that's dead last. So I gave The Conjuring: Last Rites a 66 out of 100 possible star rating, or a C+ letter grade. When averaged with the other films, this Conjuring series sits around a 65% overall, and if it weren't for the second movie's really high score, that number would be significantly lower. It's a fitting enough send-off for the Warrens, even if it doesn't leave the strongest impression. But what about you guys though? What do you think about The Conjuring: Last Rites? Please share your thoughts about it in the comment section down below. I'm very curious on how you rank this series as a whole. As for YouTube, you guys know what to do. Hit the like, subscribe button, and bell to be notified when I come out with my next review, whenever and whatever that may be on. Until that day comes though, peace out.